Uh, Let me also share some of the rudimentary questions asked by students when we look at a resume. Questions like should I be mentioning an objective in my resume or not? Should I be mentioning the declaration in my resume or not? Should I have a photograph on my resume or not? So what is your take on such kind of questions? Should a student be mentioning the objective or declaration or have a photograph of his or her on the resume?
Uh, Resume design is neither science nor art. It's a combination of both. When I say it's not a science, it means there's nothing like a fixed rule. My point is very simple. You design the resume in the way you are able to project your attributes the best. But having said that, you also need to understand what the company requires. Now, if the company is specifically mentioning the fact that objectives are required or declaration is required or photograph is required, let me cite an example. Now, quite often you will notice the fact that companies who are looking for front office experts, they need to have the photograph because for them being pleasant is an important attribute. So if they were to ask for a photograph and you don't give the photograph, obviously your thing is not going forward. So the first thing that we need to ask is, what does the company want? So company has categorically said that they want an objective, then you need to give objective, and yes, there are companies which mention that. But in case that has not been the case, then the flexibility is yours. My personal belief is that objectives are today, most of these objectives which I have seen are copy and paste. They take a content from somewhere, they make it sound very good. So there's something original in that.
In fact, I still remember, a student of mine was mentioning, sir, my senior has mentioned objective on his resume. So I'm just following that format.
Now that is something that's very common, unfortunately, because objective is something that's a complex English, and many of our students are not very good in that with that complexity. So they tend to copy it. For me, that's a bad news, because if any question were to be asked in that area, it will complicate the whole story, because it's not an original thought anyway. And there's a second reason why I'm against it, because in the resume, especially if it's a two-pager resume, first page is more important than the second page, and objective falls in the first page. Therefore, objective is something I would strongly recommend students to avoid. But when it comes to declaration, things change. Now, if a company were to come to your campus, then a declaration is not really required, because your college is responsible for all the data points mentioned in the resume. Because every document that is presented by you comes through the college. However, if you are applying for off-campus or you are sending a resume to a company, then declaration in my view is compulsory, because someone has to authenticate the information. Someone has to certify the fact that what you have said or put down in paper is true. Therefore, for me, yes, declaration is something that should be included in these two cases of off-campus or you sending directly to the company.
You have actually brought up a very valid point, the point about providing the right documentation, supporting the claims your student is making during an interview. One of the things students tend to ask me is, sir, I have an achievement, but I do not have a supporting documentation. Could I still go ahead and present that achievement on my resume? Can I speak about it?
I would have gone ahead and talked about it if I were the student. As a HR professional, when I'm interviewing a person, frankly, I do not have time to run through the certificates. For me, how does the credibility established? Credibility for me is established more from the perspective of your ability to answer the questions when I ask for one. I also understand the fact that getting a certificate is not a big deal. So for all I know, you could have got the certificate from someone else. So even if you have a certificate, I do not really believe you. Alright, of course, I'm not going to say it that way. So how do I build that faith? I ask you more questions. So if I'm convinced by the fact that you have been able to, address all the concerns which I have, for me that is proof enough. So my recommendation is very simple. If you do not have a proof, do not worry about it. Mention that in the resume and go ahead, if they ask, go ahead and talk about the fact that you don't have the proof because you didn't get that proof. But yes, any question if asked, you will be in a position to answer that.
The next question I have is, the question is that, sir, winning a dumb charades, does it make a good point onto my resume? Games like dumb charades, games like participation aspects like elocution, can I present them on my resume or not? Essay writing, etc., etc. Do they look trivial, or do they actually serve a purpose of impressing the HR?
No, I will be impressed. A couple of things, however. If it's an interview that is happening after graduation, I'm probably not going to be so much impressed by what you have done in early schooling. So I will not give so much weightage for anything, let's say, below the class 8th. But let us say after that you have been involved in elocution. Yes, elocution talks about a lot of things. It talks about your ability to think fast. It talks about your ability to speak and bring about the coordination between thinking and speaking. Dumb charade is creativity for me. So there's absolutely nothing trivial on that. My point is very simple. If you have done many things, then yes, you need to prioritize what to include. In that situation, you might decide to exclude few things. But if you have done only few things, please go ahead and do that. Nothing is trivial. For example, as I said, dumb charade is creativity. So for you, it is, as a student, it might be trivial, dumb charade. For me, in the mind, it is creativity. And creativity is a trait which I would love to have in my team members, yes.
Now, if I am a student who has won a singing competition in my 10th class, won it during my intermediate, and I've been winning my singing competition right through my graduation. So should I be mentioning it on my resume saying won it in 10th class, won it in intermediate, won it in graduation, or should I be consolidating all these points into one single point? What is your advice?